I saw you on Jimmy Fallon. How did that happen?
Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show has a book club called Fallon Book Club, and he takes the first book out. He says, this is the shortlist, and then takes the book and he says, What Will People Think by Sara Hamdan.
This is What Will People Think by Sara Hamdan?
Maybe I'm giving them a way to talk about Palestine that's an in. It's almost like the gateway book, to these bigger current issues. I think I had to build the confidence over the years to really dream big. At the beginning, I just didn't really know what that dream would look like. I just wanted to get published. I didn't know if I had a shot at making it, and I didn't even know what making it would mean. And I even see it in the reviews now. Some people find it hilarious, and other people are like, wow, that was profoundly unfunny. So I love that this is being packaged as a romantic comedy, and it is. But there is something that we've also never seen, which is a very human, joyful side of Palestinian culture.
I remember hearing you talk about a previous novel. What was that book and how did that prepare you for this one?
That one, I still think the story idea is really great. One comment that I regularly got was that it was almost like I was whitewashing myself. They wanted to feel a hint of the Arab side of me, which is fair. I do have Palestinian heritage. I live in Dubai. But in my mind, a great story is a great story. And I've also lived all over the world. I've lived in London for a big chunk in my life, in Greece, in the States. So I just thought, well, why can't I write a book where the main character is named Zoe?
Hey, welcome to the Hikila podcast. My name is Mikey Mhanna. Today on the series, we have Sara Hamdan, who is the author of the book, What Will People Think? ? And this book's making a lot of waves. It's very exciting. Sara, welcome to the series.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat to you.
Really, really basic question. Over a decade ago, you're trying to become an author, and you're thinking to yourself, what is the best case scenario for this initiative? Or this project that I'm on. What did you think? What was best case scenario? Are you a dream big kind of crazy big goal type person, or were you I'm afraid to dream?
I think I had to build the confidence over the years to really dream big. At the beginning, I just didn't really know what that dream would look like. I just wanted to get published. And honestly, the publishing industry is so opaque and it's so unpredictable. I didn't know if I had a shot at making it, and I didn't even know what making it would mean. So I think for me, it was just about trying to learn how to tell a really good story and then figuring out those steps, because there really is no playbook. I just wanted to get published in a big market like the US or the UK, and I was hoping for a good review somewhere. And where we are now is something that I tried to manifest, and we did the affirmations, and I did all the writing courses, and I hustled, and it has been a 10-year period. But it has really been so humbling to see where it's reached. And I'm so excited because it's a 2-book deal. It feels like there's momentum building up to creating a life as an author, which is the overall big dream for me. I want to spend my life telling stories. There's that young Sarah inside who is trying to please her parents, and I studied finance, and I tried working in banking, and it really wasn't me, and I was a terrible banker, I'll admit it. So I feel like I'm coming home to myself, and I'm so excited to see what's going to come next.
So funny, when I was prepping for this and I was listening to your background, it reminded me so much of myself.
I know.
Because it's obligatory stretch in finance. There's I'm really trying to be a good kid. I don't want to embarrass my family. I don't want to embarrass. And then at some point, there's just this release where it's شو بدي أعمل إنه this is who I am. I don't know how to change that.
Yeah, it's a strange push and pull within yourself, because if you are good at doing different things, it's really hard to figure out where you should spend your energies. I did want to try and do the good girl thing and study business, and that has a stable career trajectory. But at the end of the day, my heart wasn't in it. I felt like my soul was just withering a little bit. I didn't feel like myself. And I think maybe you just have to go through that to figure out what it is you really want to do with your life, and then it adds more meaning to it. One of the authors I really admire, Cecilia Ahern, who's Irish, she actually blurred for me, which is amazing. And it was my first kind of moment of validation. So right out of college, she wrote P.S. I Love You. And it was an instant, huge bestseller hit and became a movie right away. And she and I are the same age. So when I met her at the Emirates Literature Foundation, I was looking at her and thinking, wow, imagine if I had made it sooner, how my life would have been different. But I feel like I've been through the trenches, and this means so much to me. And it means so much to, I think, Arab readers, that this kind of story has come out in this big way because of what we've had to go through to get there.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier that I want to talk about. You said, I took all the courses, right? I feel like there's this and one of those courses, which you've talked about in a couple different interviews, is you took a stand-up comedy course, right? So I want to talk about the value or the misconceptions of taking courses, because I mean, it's very easy to roll your eyes at that type of stuff. What do you want with that? These are like Instagram ads for stupid courses. Like, what are you going to learn to be a stand-up comedian? This is such a waste. Like, I want to give you an opportunity to pitch these as valuable things to people who are who want to become serious practitioners of whatever they're trying to do.
I think when you're a creative, collaboration is actually essential. So writing is usually very solitary. You're sitting quietly at your laptop. It's almost meditative. But your work can only get better when you get a little bit of feedback and you almost stress test it. So that means that you have to put it out there, have people read it, workshop it, and that is done through courses. So I did a lot of writing courses. A lot of them were online because we didn't have them here where I'm based in Dubai. So I do Curtis Brown Creative. It's an agency because I was trying to get my foot in the door. So they offer these courses for writers to work on their novels. Faber Academy is another one. So I just would try these little things. I submitted my writing to a lot of competitions and contests online. So there was that side of it. And then there was the comedy side of it, which is comedy writing is really unique. It has beats, it has rhythm. It's almost scientific in the way that it's planned when a punchline, like how you set up a punchline and how you have that dramatic ending of it. It's also really subjective. What I find funny, you may not. And I even see it in the reviews now. Some people find it hilarious and other people are like, wow, that was profoundly unfunny. And that's fine because we even see that with comedians today. So it's a different form of storytelling that I think is really powerful. You can say what you actually want to say when you're being funny under this veneer of like, oh, but we're just having a laugh. So for me, it was a perfect framing device for Mia, who was trying to tackle these culture stereotypes. So this was why I wanted to do the comedy courses. But comedy also has a special place in my heart because after I graduated from Columbia, I did my master's. I began to write for the New York Times, and my very first story out of the Middle East was about the rise of stand-up comedy. And I interviewed a bunch of comedians. I've always liked comedy. My college roommate was a stand-up comedian. I like funny people. So when I was trying to interview people for this piece, I spoke to a bunch of comics, and they said, you need to speak to someone named Jamil. He's a producer. He puts on events. And I interviewed Jamil, and he ended up being my husband. So,
Nice.
yeah. So I also kind of seeded this idea that through humor and shared laughter, you can find love. And that's where the courses can help you not only hone your craft, but maybe even create relationships that become essential in your life. And I don't mean that you'll take a course and find your partner, but I do mean that you could find a mentor.
Or your money back.
Yeah. I think it doesn't harm. I'm a big believer. I mean, I can see behind you, you have guitars. Isn't it nicer to play with people? It brings different meaning to it, right? It's the same with writing.
Do you, when you were younger, were you a fan of this specific genre? Were you like, oh my God, I love this type of romantic comedy, quirky, coming of age, interesting, I don't know if you would categorize it as that, but if it's turned into a movie, for sure, it's going to be a romantic comedy. Definitely, obviously. Was that the genre that you like, where you're like, oh, clearly this is what I'm doing. I'm not writing a deep, personal, gut wrenching, deeply dark memoir. I'm not writing something that's like hard to follow. That's I'm not writing historical fiction, although obviously there's a big historical part of it. Um, I'm not writing a biography. Is this like what you loved growing up anyway?
A lot of it is what I loved growing up, and it's also what we were told was good literature, in the sense that I grew up reading everything from the Jane Austens to the Judy Blooms, and a lot of that is coming of age. My novel is coming of age in the sense that it's Mia who's in her 20s and she's trying to figure herself out, her life and her love. But it's also her grandmother who's in her 70s. And you discover that there's a coming of age at any age. And it's kind of a portrait of womanhood. And I never ever saw representation. I would have loved to read something like this when I was younger. I would have loved to read something like this now. I would love to read something like this when I'm in my 70s. And I think I just wanted to speak to that, being an Arab woman or being a daughter of an immigrant, being a misfit. I think that there's a universality to it, and that's also why it got this appeal. I do love a good romantic comedy, even with movies. I'll watch any J-Lo or Jennifer Aniston movie that's out there. But what I wanted to accomplish, and I hope that I did with this, is that it's a romantic comedy on the surface, but then there's this deep emotional trajectory with the grandmother's diary that comes in a third of the way into the story. And you get this, the writing is different. It's almost like mimicking the settings. So the scenes that take place in New York are written in a way that's fast-paced and fun and a bit loose. And then the diary scenes are written in a more thoughtful prose. It takes you a little bit slower. It showcases the simple village life. And you essentially get to witness what it was like to be a family that was getting displaced in Palestine in the 1940s. So I love that this is being packaged as a romantic comedy, and it is. But there is something that we've also never seen, which is a very human, joyful side of Palestinian culture that is never, ever brought to the foreground because, of course, we're seeing all the terrible things that are happening. I mean, I also have to say at this point that it's been just the most heart-wrenching thing to witness the last couple of years on the back of the last 75 years. And now to have to talk about a book where the main character is a comedian and of Palestinian origin has been very difficult, but I almost think necessary. It's a little bit of hope and relief. And if you're not moved by a headline that talks about hundreds of people dying a day, maybe you'll be moved about a story of a woman who's just like you, looking for love with the same dreams. And she can't just because of circumstance or where she was born or things out of our control. You know, this is what makes storytelling so powerful.
100%. I realized I jumped right into this. I didn't even ask you to like give the big headline of what kind of the book is about. When you pitched it, if you were to describe how you sort of generally pitched it to folks at cocktail parties, what would you say the book is about?
The elevator pitch.
The elevator pitch, yeah.
It's about a young woman in New York named Mia who is trying to do all the right things. And she has a respectable job by day, but by night she moonlights as a stand-up comedian, and her family and her friends don't know. It's kind of like her own little raunchy secret. And it's where she lets loose. And her grandmother gives her a journal that she kept that details this illicit love affair with a British soldier in Jaffa in 1947. So you get these interspersed chapters, and as Mia is figuring herself and her own voice out, she's learning about her grandmother, and there's just this idea that we are made up of the ancestors who came before us, and that will also feed into our future. So you're finding out about these two women and the sometimes bad choices they make in who they want to love, but how everything can work out in the end. There are some surprises along the way. And it's very heartfelt. There are some funny moments. Some of it is based on my own experiences of living in New York City. I've never been to Palestine myself, but the village scenes were inspired by my grandmother's childhood anecdotes in Jaffa and a lot of research in libraries. So there's a lot of heart put into this. And like we mentioned earlier, it's been a 10-year journey of piecing it together, getting it just right. And I'm so happy that there's been a really great reception to it. It means everything to me.
Would the year 3 version of the book be decidedly dissimilar to the year 10 version?
I think I grew with it, and I think I needed to figure out my own voice and what I wanted to say. I've spent an entire career as a journalist writing for other newspapers and other editors, so I needed to figure out what does a Sara voice sound like and what's the message that I want to put out. If you're going to spend 300 pages on a book and expect a reader to spend that with you, you need to make it worth their time. So I feel like I got everything in there that I wanted to. There's a lot packed in there. Um, but I think I gave the story its room to breathe. I think if I was rushing or if I needed to just get it out there for the sake of getting published, it wouldn't be what it is now. It's kind of like a wine. I put it together, I let it distill, I swirled it around, and then now it's come out in a very unique way that I think if it was the 3-year version, would it be good? Yeah, maybe. But the diary scenes that I mentioned that take place in Palestine in the 1940s, that was all written as one block in the year that I was pregnant with my son 10 years ago. So there are some small changes that I've made along the way, but that bulk has pretty much been intact. And then I just kept tweaking and adding the modern day things, So I grew up along with this novel.
So interesting. I remember hearing you talk about like a previous novel that predated this one. Am I wrong in remembering this?
No, that's absolutely right. I call
What
it my
is that
first
novel?
pancake.
Yeah, exactly. Your first pancake.
Yeah.
Perfect. If people are listening, the saying is like pancakes that you always throw out the first one.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was that book and how did that prepare you for this one?
That one, I still think the story idea is really great, but I think I was learning how to structure a novel and the pacing, and writing fiction is very different to journalism where it's a single article and you're telling someone else's story. So I think I was finding my feet, and I did it by working on this novel. It was called Disconnected, and it was inspired by my time working at Google. I was there as an editor for 6 years, so very techie environment. And it was about a woman who's just addicted to the online world. And this was written before the pandemic, but you can imagine it now more easily that she's just does everything on Zoom, stays at home all the time, orders groceries in, and then she has to go to a Greek island to prove to her bosses that she's still capable of human interactions. And she ends up falling in love with an innkeeper, and you discover this big twist at the end that the reason why she was addicted to the tech world is because she used to communicate with the AI version of her husband who had passed away. So it's just this commentary on our relationship with technology and love, but I think my execution of it just wasn't hitting right. Either it was too fast or too slow in some places. And I think I could still work it into something. But one comment that I regularly got from readers and from editors who I was trying to work with on this was that it was almost like I was whitewashing myself. They wanted to feel a hint of the Arab side of me, which is fair. I do have Palestinian heritage. I live in Dubai. I think I can write Arab women really well because I am one. But in my mind, a great story is a great story, and I've also lived all over the world. I've lived in London for a big chunk in my life, in Greece, in the States. So I just thought, well, why can't I write a book where the main character is named Zoe? But I think it was maybe lacking that emotional depth that I learned over the years that has made this book more of a hit. There's more authentic emotion. So you learn.
The first song was like a cover song. The second was the original.
Yeah. It's exactly that. And I think, hopefully you just get better with each one.
Yeah. Do you have do you feel like you've been in this cycle of like thoughtful writing, discerning, self-editing, trying to figure out a good story, and obviously a career as a journalist prior to that? Do you feel like you have the like sixth sense of being able to hear the broad brush architecture of a story and be like, there's something missing in Act 3, very clearly. Like there needs to be a twist, or like what is the incentive? Why would that person do that? Or what is the bigger picture? Or what is the magnetism and pulling them this way? Can you hear those things immediately?
I love this question so much. And it shows that you're a creative and you think the same way too.
Yeah.
Because, you start to develop a feel for it over time. And the best way to learn is to consume great content and bad content. So I watch a lot of shows. I read everything. I read everything from the cheesy romance to the very dense 900-page, historical fiction. And you start to really develop a sense of there's a lag there, or a character wouldn't have reacted in this way to this situation, or that's missing a hook. My husband works in production, so media production, and we are a very frustrating couple to watch a movie with because he will comment on things like, oh, the lighting is off in that shot. They should have put a brighter thing over there. And I'll comment on the storytelling, and I'll say things like, oh, you know how she said that right then? That's a seed. She's going to refer to it later, and it's going to have to do something with the murder. And then I'll be right. So you do develop this instinct after a while, and I've been thinking in this way for so long that it does come naturally to me, but that doesn't make it easy. So even now I'm working on the second novel, and you have to put things out, kind of trust your gut instinct. It's a mixture of art and science. You know the 3-act or 4-act structure. You know where things need to happen and need to change and when characters should be introduced and taken out. But then you also need to take a breather, a step back, and then go back into it and say, does this feel right? It's very subjective. And that's where I go back to what I said earlier. And collaboration is really important. You need somebody who has no, emotional or vested interest in telling you, you're so great, to tell you, yes, this is very, very good, or this part felt a little bit like lost me, So collaboration is key for me.
Do you have a sense of whether we are doing a good job in the region of actually building those skill sets? Like, are we helping empower storytellers to tell nuanced, complex, but digestible stories?
I think this is such an important question. I couldn't love it more. I think in the last 5 years, I've seen a big change. So I've lived in Dubai for 20 years. And when I first came here, I didn't really find that tribe of storytellers that I was looking for. And now you find it in niches. So I can speak to the writing element. So the Emirates Literature Foundation 4 years ago launched the fellowship program that I was a part of the first cohort. And they take 10 people each year who are trying to make it on the global stage. And we got a chance to do a writing workshop once a month, a dedicated mentor who's a famous author from abroad. You get practice how to pitch to agents. So imagine you've completed a manuscript, you've done the hard work and the editing, but you're finally getting a shot to have an agent represent you. And that's the moment when you freeze. So these little key moments that without this guidance, I think things would drop. Suddenly you're getting support. I also got support when I got the agent and it went to auction and we got this bidding war and it was all exciting and the contract came in. I got support with a lawyer looking over the contract. I would have had no idea about these things myself. As an author, as a creative, you think about telling the story, but there are so many different elements. And then the next step when the book came out, marketing this product is a whole different animal. So the PR and the marketing, again, support with that. So I was part of the first cohort. Again, this was 4 years ago. So we're talking now entering this, I think, 5th year, 50 writers who are getting the proper mentorship to make it in this big way. And this is a huge change. And this is outside of things like regular programming of being able to take writing courses. I used to have to source them online. Now they're here on the ground. I'm also interested in music. I play amateur drums, and there's a huge music scene here. And again, so there are platforms where you can go to open mic nights, and there's spoken word. These are other forms of storytelling. I've also seen a lot of I wanted to ask you your opinion on this because I see a lot of these announcements about like Saudi forming an entity to support or fund script writing, let's say for TV shows. Are you seeing things coming out of that? Because I think what I'm trying to say is that there are many different stakeholders. There's academia, so helping students learn how to do good storytelling. And then there's government support in terms of funding and giving platforms. And then there's the actual creators themselves. Are you also seeing movement in this in other parts of the region?
Yeah, I would say in Saudi, UAE, and Qatar, it's very commercial. There's a clear commerce element, with the eye on basically adding to GDP.
Okay.
Let's figure out a way to tell stories that will get turned into movies and get turned into things that are really, really popular and will generate money, or later on through sales, or later on tourism. I think that's like a very clear strategy. I think in the other parts of the Arab world or the region more broadly, there's like a lot of really important and emphasis on the sort of the creative side. Not that they don't overlap, but it's like the perspective, obviously, that they're coming at. So I can speak about Beirut really well. There's like a lot of work happening in Beirut around creative writing. This is true, and obviously in the UAE, like Barjeel had this amazing short story contest that they did with Rusted Radishes, which is a literary journal in Lebanon. So in Sharjah and Beirut, they sort of collaborated on this amazing short story contest. So there's a lot of this stuff. I think it seems like there is, because we're very multilingual, there's still work to be done to empower that side. And instead of just having this like divide of, this is either Arabic or English, but rather this is sort of hyphenate. And so I think that's happening slowly, but yeah, I don't know. I definitely don't know enough about what's happening on the commercial side, because I think that actually is that I think is like a needle mover.
Yeah. I think Lebanon
And maybe you
has,
disagree. You might disagree. You might have a different perspective come in.
I think Lebanon has an amazing organic creative scene. Like you'll walk by a street and you'll hear music pouring out from somewhere, or it's got this more natural scene. Here it feels like it's curated a little more. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think Dubai is very cosmopolitan. You have people living here from all over the world, and you have to be intentional with the community that you form and put energy into building. But this is where I do think that the commercial side can help. So when there is, in the case of the Emirates Literature Foundation, putting money and actual mentorship has built a real writing scene that didn't exist 5 years ago in the same way. So now we have regular meetups, and I have people I can talk to about these things, about reviews and how to navigate submission and all of these things that I would have loved guidance on when I was going through it. And I also think it's empowering that, like, you and I have a chance now to create real change. We can do it, and we are doing it. And this is why I love to put myself forward to talk. And I always find people coming up telling me that they have their own stories and they don't know where to start, and can they start, and should they start, and what will people think? So some of it is even our own internal barriers of those expectations of you have to work a job and have the visa in order to stay. How do you have a creative pursuit on the side when you live here, So there are all these factors, but at the end of the day, I'll go back to that feeling that the 20-year-old Sarah had when she was sitting at Merrill Lynch and just thinking, God, I'm in front of a computer with these flashing lights, and I want to be telling stories. Sometimes you can't help but just let all the noise fade and just do it. If you love it, you'll do it. It'll find you the way that you want to find it.
Yeah. Who are some of your favorite authors or playwrights or script writers at the time when you were like 28, at like peak of fandom, and like obsessive fandom? Like, who were some of your writer crushes?
You know, there are some books that I read over and over, even every
Yeah.
couple of years. And as I get older and I have more experiences, I have a different experience with the book. One of them I'd say is The Handmaid's Tale. I think it's amazing how she created an entire world and it feels so real, and it's got uh, a wonderful focus on female characters and how they come into their own or not. So I'd say that's a really solid one. I also love Najib Mahfouz. I think the Palace Walk trilogy is a magical masterpiece. And he just creates these characters that feel so nuanced, like no one is actually good or bad. And it's this family unit. And I love that it's a little bit about this part of the world. Um, I also love Elena Ferrante. She's an Italian author. She wrote a 4-part series, and the first one is called My Brilliant Friend, and it's just about these female friendships. So it starts off with the girls when they're kind of like frenemies when they're young, so a bit of coming of age again. They're frenemies, and they're a little bit competitive with schoolwork and with their crushes. And then through this 4-part book series, it takes them through graduating when one of them gets married and goes for the more traditional lifestyle, and the other one ends up dating a mafioso. And then as they become mothers, and it's just this beautiful saga. And to hold your attention for that long on these characters, I think is really important. I was also a travel writer for a lot of my career. I love interesting settings, and I love seeing how even though people can live in different parts of the world, we're actually very similar in the things that we want. So I love books that take place in just different settings. And I think the 3 that I mentioned, the standout in them is that it's a sense of place or a different time, and I love that. What about you?
For me, I mean, I love scripts in general, so I'm drawn towards film, TV, plays in general. And I've dyslexia, so I was like a very slow reader, very, very, very slow reader. So growing up, I honestly didn't have tons of books that I loved because reading was so painful for me.
Mm.
But I mean, like when I think, to me, like when thinking about the genre of romantic comedy, I feel like there's like a couple. There's like at least when I was a kid, there was like the Nick Hornsby like sort of catalog that very much plays to guys.
Yeah,
that has
true.
like very very guy energy. But because I'm a musician too, I like ate up all the music content. And then there's like the Nora Ephron sort of catalog of insanely good writing. There isn't any fat on any of the script.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It works really, really well. Did you have in mind when you started publishing and you got your deal, like, okay, I'm gonna start thinking about writing going forward, with an eye towards this being on the screen at some point?
I think
Does it change the way you think and the way you write?
when you were saying before about do you dream big or not, I think every writer has a secret hope that their book will be adapted into a film or TV show. And I would love that. I think that would be amazing. And this book came out in the same year that Mohamed's show came out, the season 2, and that was so beautifully done. It was just funny and haunting, and it also had a lot of similar themes. So it's a Palestinian American family and his experience of then going into Palestine. So there was a lot of tie-in, and I just thought, wow, I would love to see my story told in this way and have it be received in this way. So there's almost like a blueprint that didn't exist before. So I'm feeling like the timing is right for this to happen, and I would love it. And I think part of the way that the book is written is quite cinematic in the sense that there is a lot of, it's not heavy-handed, but there's a lot of setting description. You have the New York City comedy club circuit, but then you also have the simple village life in Jaffa with the olive trees and all of that and that nostalgia. I think it could play really beautifully on film. So let's hope the universe hears us.
Yeah. Universe is a subscriber, don't worry.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I keep on asking, I'm like circling around this question, but I'm curious. Let's say somebody comes up to you from the fellowship at the Amidst Literature Foundation, or somebody hears this or hears something else and is like, dude, I saw you in Jimmy Fallon. How did that happen? How do I get there? What is your description? What is your advice?
You know, it's still such a surreal moment that even when you're asking me this question, I have to take a beat and think, oh my God, he's talking about me.
Yeah.
I always wanted this book to get published. I was always hoping for a good review at a reputed outlet. So as an author, you're thinking, wow, if my book makes the New York Times recommended reading list, I'm set. Like that. That's a sign of success. No matter what happens with the book sales, you have critical acclaim. So it began with the book coming out in May, and then we started getting these incredible media hits. So the New York Times was the first, and then Forbes and Goodreads and Vogue, and there was that instant buzz. And then a couple of weeks after that, my publisher wrote me an email saying that Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show has a book club called Fallon Book Club, and they requested extra copies for coverage consideration. And I didn't know what that meant, and I ChatGPT'd it, and it just meant that the producers might either choose to mention it or include it on their website. So I didn't really know, but it felt so validating to even be on their radar. So that happened in mid-June. And then I checked in with my publisher in July, no update. I checked in August, no update. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe they read it and it wasn't for them. And then I woke up one morning and I'm scrolling on Instagram. First thing, open the app and I see Fallon Tonight, and I'm reading the subtitles and it says, we're going to announce the winner of the Fallon Book Club today. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't hear from my publisher, so I guess I didn't make the cut. Let's see who else made it. And he takes the first book out. He says, this is the shortlist. And he puts the first book out. And on the side, I see my title, like the spine, the title. I'm thinking,
like
I'm looking like this. Yeah. I'm looking like this. And I say, Jamil, wake up, look at this. And then Jimmy Fallon takes the book and he says, What Will People Think by Sara Hamdan.
This is What Will People Think by Sara Hamdan?
And it was just such it's one of those things that you knew it could happen, but it just seemed like such a big, big moment. And you have this pop culture icon saying, pay attention to this, at a time when also it feels like an important message because you're talking about a very human, warm Palestinian story while this catastrophe is happening that you see in the news every day. And he's saying, this is worth reading, guys. So it was just, it's a moment I'll never forget. It felt like the rest of that day was a Christmas and wedding day put together. I was getting messages from, my middle school English teacher and my parents' friends and my former colleagues. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful high. And I'm still feeling it weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like, it's hilarious to me that you didn't even know it was happening.
No, I honestly, like I said, you hope. And I thought maybe like I'd seen in the past that he would put out a list on the website of like, these are the 20 books that I'm considering reading. And it's just like a short list that's on a website. But to have him like hold the book and say my name, I think that felt extraordinary, It was wonderful.
The American media is like, they're schizophrenic in some ways, right? So at some point, and you're a journalist, you understand this better than I do, but at some point, like on the same network where they won't even basically say the word Palestine.
Yeah.
They'll only describe Palestinians. They won't say the word Palestine. They'll say Gaza. They won't say Palestine. They won't call what's happening by its name. They won't say this is an Israeli genocide. They won't say Israel killed people. They'll say they died. It's insane to me that on that same network, they're like, oh, by the way, you should read this book about Palestinian displacement for 75 years, which rhymes perfectly with what is happening right now.
I know. And the thing is, the way that I frame it in my own mind is maybe I'm giving them a way to talk about Palestine that's an in. It's almost like the gateway book, to these bigger current issues. So for somebody, you'll come across people who until now will say things like, I don't do politics, or that doesn't have to do with me, or I'll refrain from speaking because I don't know enough about it. Well, here's a nice little rom-com that happens to also mention Palestinian displacement. Now you know about it. And now maybe you'll have something more informed to say. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with siding with humanity and being human. And my story is about being human. My story also happens to include a lot of joy. And I think joy is a basic human right.
Breaking news. Joy is a basic human right. Do you find yourself getting angry? You're like, you have a really sunny disposition. I can feel that you're open. You're trying to you give people space. Do you find yourself ever getting insanely angry and frustrated? Because the subject matter that you're dealing with is infuriating.
It is. And I think I'm naturally a really calm, even keeled person. I even have my mom friends say, do you ever shout at your kids? I can't imagine it. Your voice is so soft. Of course I get angry. And I think what we're seeing now is the most infuriating thing. But I've also learned that when you shout and you're angry, people don't actually listen. They're defensive, and they're not trying to take in what you're saying. They're almost trying to react. So I've found that my natural way of speaking, my artistic way of communicating this humanitarian crisis is actually moving people in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been attuned to otherwise. When I look on the reviews that come in now, a lot of them say things like, I've never read anything before about Palestine. And I think that this is really important. I'm not here to... I'm also very aware of my role. I have no desire to educate. I think that the internet is there, and I think that I am a good representation. And I think that, when I hear things like, this is a great story because it humanizes, it almost sounds like because we're not human, so I needed to point out that this is humanizing. And
it's
I
you're
really
humanizing a table.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like it's an insulting thing without even realizing. And I come across it all the time. I've done events where people say things like, it's so great to see a story that's about an ethnic minority. And I'm thinking, to you, not to me. It's all perspective. I think what I've learned about myself is that I've had a very interesting upbringing because I've lived all around the world, and I've always been a misfit. But that also means that I can also talk to anyone. I can make friends with anyone. I can make friends with your table and your guitar right behind you right now. And I think that's also why I was good at being a journalist. But that also means that I'm regularly in conversations that are infuriating. And I've learned that if you react with anger, you never get anywhere. And it's not on purpose. I'm not constantly holding myself in. This is who I am. But I've learned that a few calm, key choice words said with a smile can create a lot more change than me saying, well, the UN Convention and the Geneva Convention and this happened in 1948 and this, and why don't you read? And I will also say that for a lot of people, this furious feeling is maybe one that's new. It's in the last couple of years that you've seen. But as somebody with Palestinian heritage, I've heard these stories my whole life. I've heard my mother's stories. We've been in a household with the TV on all the time. I've heard it from my own grandmother. It's not new. So how are you supposed to live a life where you're furious all the time? You can't.
Yeah. I want to change gears for a second. I'm curious about, in addition to you being joyful, you're also like a straight up hustler. Nobody can squeeze in 3 careers at your age without hustling like a crazy person, which I can relate to. But let's say a younger cousin comes to you, they're 15, and they're like, hey, what does it take to be successful? What does it take to be a writer? What is your advice for hustling in a way that isn't broy sort of, you just got to grind. I wake up at 4. I wake up at 4 a.m. have my protein shake. Then I do, like, aside from that sort of broy energy, what is your approach to being useful and being effective?
You know, you're a hustler too, so I would really love to hear your view on this. For me,
Sure.
I think it's understanding your limits and where you can kind of put your foot on the pedal and when you need to take it off. So I mentioned to you, I was a terrible banker. Like, if I had stayed on that track, maybe I wouldn't have had the kind of career I'd had. But because I tuned into where my talents were and then I sharpened the craft, I became a better journalist and writer, and it's led to all of this. So it's part of it is figuring out where your energy should be spent. I think that's good advice. The second thing is, I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to take it a little bit easier, because I just thought, I am doing a lot and it's, maybe it's too much and all of that, but you know yourself best. I love to achieve. Maybe this is like some undiagnosed ADHD or some generational trauma of, like, my parents had to flee the Kuwait War and we need financial stability and all that. So I became that hardworking, like, a hard work ethic is ingrained in my family. But working hard and working with a team makes me feel really good. And I think that's okay. So there's also acceptance of that. It's not hustle in the sense of you must wake up at 4 a.m. and get in before everyone else and all that. I do not subscribe to that at all, which is my third point. To be a high achiever and a high performer, you need to learn how to rest well. And I think this is something that I've actively worked on, I'd say, since the pandemic. And then I'll just add the last one, which is meditation. I meditate every day. And this is the least bro culture point that I can offer to you, which is I think in this day and age, when there is the hustle culture and we're online all the time and we're all working hard, it's really hard and it's really necessary to take a step back and sit with yourself in quiet and close your eyes and do absolutely nothing for 10 minutes. Stretch it to 15 minutes a day, stretch it to half an hour. And then you find yourself recharged. It's not a nap and it's not a cigarette break, It is just sitting very, very quietly, listening to a guided meditation. I'd say this is a superpower that I've built, that if I could say is my number one tip for anyone who's trying to hustle or be creative, it is just that meditation it's a game changer.
Yeah. Have you heard the phrase slow is smooth and smooth is fast?
No, but it sounds like a rap riff.
It's not. But I it's that idea. Like, ironically, if you slow down, you move faster.
Yeah. And I feel that. And I think having children makes you rethink your time, I can't do everything anymore. I have children and they're very demanding on my time. So when I am doing something else, it needs to be worth it. It makes you slow down.
Okay. Last question before we wrap up is recommendations. I didn't give you this beforehand. I probably should have. I didn't. But do you have recommendations of authors or books that you're like, if you're listening to this, these are great places to look?
Is this for someone who's interested in reading fiction or someone who wants to be a writer? Help me frame it.
I would say somebody who's interested in fiction and ideally interested in the Arab world.
Arab world. Okay, then I would say Najib Mahfouz, because I would say that that's our version of a classic that has translated really well all over the world. He's a master at structure. So if you just take a look at how he has structured the books and when the pacing happens and how the Egyptian revolution is taking place in the background, but the family dynamic troubles are in the foreground. It's really, really beautiful work. Excuse me. And then if you're looking for something a little bit more, I'd say contemporary, I'm not a huge poetry reader. I do like, a poetic, maybe flavor in my own writing sometimes, but I don't read poetry regularly. But I really liked Musab Abu Taha's poetry work. He released a book this year. And I think that sometimes that poetry is easier to read because it's short and sweet and bite-sized. So if you're looking to get into something, maybe to understand what's happening in Palestine, that's a good one. And then I think just don't be afraid to pick up something that you wouldn't normally read. So I love to go to secondhand bookshops. And then if you see books that there are multiple of them, you'll know that people have tried to read this and pick it up. I will tell you what I don't read myself and I've never been able to get into is wildly popular is the fantasy, like the Court of Roses and Thorns and all of those. It's never been my vibe, but that's extremely popular. So if you're looking for something to, maybe it's escapism, it's got like Game of Thrones, but more feminine, I think that would be a good recommendation if the kind of books that I've suggested are not your vibe.
Yeah. Handmaiden Tale is not fantasy, but it does have world building type vibes.
It does have world building because it takes place in a fictional setting.
Yeah.
But it's more about like the emotions of this woman who is told that she has a certain role to play in her society. And there's all these like little sentences that they all have to say when they greet each other. And it's just, it's a really interesting look. It's like, did you ever read Lord of the Flies when you were in school about the kids on the island? So imagine that, but it's not an island. It's a setting that's like Cambridge or Boston, Harvard. And then it's a bunch of women who are given like, even they're color-coded what they're supposed to wear, depending on their role in society. So some women are the baby makers and some women are the kitchen staff. And it's an insane read. I love it.
Do you, okay, this is actually the last question because I'm curious about this. How do you feel about these? I was talking about to somebody about this yesterday. How do you feel about those authors that churn out books like every year? Like the James Patterson, Tom Clancy's, these types of characters, Stephen King's that are just churning them out. Do you look at that and you're like, man, mad respect? Or you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is ridiculous.
It's amazing because I've always written on the side of other things like work and kids, which is why it took me 10 years to get that first book out. Now that I don't have that full-time job anymore, I left it last June to live my best author life. Would I churn out a book a year? I don't know. I think each story needs its own time. Like I was telling you before, it needs its time to breathe. I think you can always tell if a story is rushed, right? And when you read these things, maybe they have a formula that works. Maybe for many of them, there's like if they're in the murder mystery genre and it's like easy to just change the characters and the settings around, but you're following the same structures, then maybe then. I will say for myself, I have like 10 story ideas I would love to work on. But what I'm seeing is that you need time to tell it right. I don't know. Maybe it's just a different type of story. And I will say that, as you know, because you're creative yourself, each creative has their own process. Some people, like Taylor Jenkins Reid in the US, she's popped out a book every year or year and a half, and they're all tremendous bestsellers. So sometimes it works for some people. And then you have others like The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood. She wrote the sequel 20 years later, So I think there's no rhyme or reason to when something's going to work. And you just got to put out when the work is ready, as far as you feel it.
Yeah. Sara, thanks so much. This is so much fun. People can find the book everywhere. So please check out What Will People Think by Sara Hamdan. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I loved our chat.